Hey everyone, welcome back to Pyyro TV. I have the great pleasure of sitting here with Anthony. He is the COO of the Europe, Middle East and Asia group for Deloitte.
Almost. Europe, Middle East and Africa.
Oh, so close. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you being here. I'd love to learn more about what Deloitte does, specifically as it pertains to enterprise blockchains. I feel like that in the space, especially that B2B space, is exploding so fast. But I think in the beginning, blockchain was maybe felt more consumer driven, so it's interesting to kind of see this just blowing up as it is now.
Sure thing, couldn't agree with you more. I think what we can observe is that in the public blockchain, the ICO, crypto space, things have moved faster, right? So it's theoretically easier to launch a token, raise funds, and see immediate impact. When you're looking from an enterprise perspective, it's much more complicated. You're seeing either entirely new structures, consortium being spun up. You've got traditional competitors, companies who would hate each other, who would very rarely ever sit in the same room, investing together in a venture.
Sure.
Right? That's groundbreaking. Blockchain has really moved that particular domain on. But that's complicated, right? So before you even get to cutting any code, you've got to think about an aligned vision, common enemy, the governance models, the tax structures, legal entities, who's funding it, how do we think about onboarding, offboarding, before you even get to cutting any technology.
Wow.
The interesting bit there, though, is that actually when you get those organizations together, you get instant scale. Right, so whereas for a public or for a startup, you've got a great idea, you've got a really interesting technology that could be groundbreaking and disruptive, but you haven't necessarily got the permission to play because you're not incumbent.
You don't mind having the funding either, prospectively.
Absolutely, absolutely. So our view is we're working primarily with enterprise and government to an extent, public and private blockchains. So we're not particularly aligned to any one platform, a multi-platform.
Sure.
We take a multidisciplinary approach to any project. So any project you're looking at, and the same is true for startups. You've got to look at, again, strategy, tax, legal, operating model structures, people structures, and then set up the entity and get going.
Sure.
So there's a lot in that. So while I suspect you're probably seeing less visible progress, in the public domain around what's happening, trust me, there's a hell of a lot going on.
Sure, and I think that agnostic approach to kind of coming towards these different corporations will really allow you to develop faster, as opposed to being very driven towards one blockchain or one project specifically. You're just not getting, I think, the growth and ability that technology has to move forward.
I think that's key, and we've seen a number of clients switch from one protocol to another, people going from Hyperledger to Corda, Ethereum to Hyperledger, Ethereum to VeChain, in case of one of the more recent announcements with DNVGL. The important thing here is what is the jobs that we're trying to do, right? In most cases, as companies, B2B, or as individuals, our desires, the things that we're wanting to do in life, the way that we want to operate, hasn't changed for 100 years. What we have is technology that enables us to do it faster, more risk-free, cover more ground scale, more quickly. Blockchain is exactly one of those types of enablers. The point here is, can we agree on what it is we're trying to achieve, and then fit the technologies, whether that's blockchain, IoT, whether we're using elements of cloud, whether we're using elements of AI, whatever that might be, put the right technology capabilities together to solve the problems that we're trying to solve. That's when you then get real transformation. If you start saying, I've got a blockchain, what do I do with it? You can get somewhere, if you've got the right good ideas, you'll progress. But if you actually start with a common vision and you say, this is the strategy we're trying to execute, we need the certain technologies that give us that, you're in a much better place. In some cases you can work with startups or not. The other thing that's interesting is that in the traditional startup fintech model, you can see companies start with a small business, create some great functionality, but then be acquired. So you'd see a whole bunch of small companies go in and then be acquired by a bank or whoever it might be. With public blockchains or token-based businesses or crypto-based businesses, you can't do that. Right? You're public. You either bang and you go big, or you die.
Yeah.
Right. Having an enterprise acquire a token business is really tricky. Not impossible, but generally speaking, to date, that's quite hard. So we haven't seen that much, enterprise startup collaboration move from ideation to acquire. It's either you're in place, you're in situ, and you go, or you're part of an ecosystem where a startup's providing some of the technology capability, and the enterprise provide the scale, the people, the funding, and maybe some aspects of the technology too.
Sure.
That's really difficult, and that's something that I can observe why blockchain is really different and to think differently. versus some of the other ways that startups and enterprises engage.
And I feel like blockchain is such a hot word right now that it's like attached to many projects that maybe don't need blockchain in the first place. Do you find that when you're speaking with, let's say, like new clients who are kind of in their development phase of trying to understand this, and like you said, they're guys like, I have a blockchain, what do I do with this? Like, I was actually speaking with a colleague of mine who's working with a very large company. They said, well, I have a $20 million blockchain budget and I don't know what to do with this. Do you guys find that in the industry that there's a big education curve to like, we need blockchain, but we don't really know why?
So where I think the industry has helped us to a large extent is saying that there is a new technology capability that we have. Marketing has been through the roof, hype has been through the roof, which is helpful. What you've got to do then is use that for good, or use that objectively, saying
propulsion.
It's not I've got a blockchain, I must do something with it. It's saying we can think about platform-based technologies where you've got multiple parties coming together to do something. Right? Take blockchain out of the phrasing and say, actually, I want to build a platform for something. Where does that apply in my industry? Where does that apply in my business? Maybe you're the likes of a Walmart or an Airbus. You own the ecosystem, right? Your first, second, and third tier suppliers. You can mandate standards. You can mandate technology, and they can move quickly. In other cases, you know that you're in an industry where you've got a problem with lack of data transparency, sequential process, fraud. Everyone's got to work with KYC. Everyone's got to work with procurement. That's a common problem that everybody has. Don't duplicate the same capability in every organization when maybe building a platform that works for the whole industry can actually help everybody just generally become more efficient and solve a number of the problems that we all have.
Sure, and I like that you guys are asking the question first of like, how do we make this, let's say, like the most efficient or its best case use, than just how do we attach blockchain to whatever this
100%. It's platform thinking, it's network and scaling models, it's game theory to an extent. There's all of those different buzzwords. I saw a wonderful diagram where somebody actually said to think differently about technology transformation, you actually need to be literate on all of these different domains. And as an executive, as a leader who's already got competing and very high stress priorities of application rationalization, re-platforming, all of that stuff just within their own house, to then have to open up their mind to say, actually, how do I co-venture with my competitors?
Sure.
How do I build platforms that are not necessarily under my control, that are in the public domain, where I've got to think about regulation, or how do I account for the transactions that happen on this platform? As an executive, that's very, very stressful. And so part of our job is to help make that a little bit more easy to understand, easy to engage with, talk empathetically rather than in technical jargon, and really say, look, there are efficiencies, there are new business models here for you. Let me break it down and walk you through where I think that makes sense.
Sure. And I know you guys just recently did, speaking of executives, you did a survey actually with executives kind of helping them to, or asking them about blockchain essentially, and what did you guys see from that survey?
So, I mean, the good news is compared to 2018, this year's survey, most of the main metrics are up. Check it out. I mean, there's some specific sort of new detail, new data this year about consortia, different geographical perspectives, perspectives between what the CIO versus the CEO, the Chief Marketing Officer is looking at. But the good news is, in terms of blockchain being a top 5 priority, 83% of executives said yes, this is top 5 for us. 10% increase on last year, or 10 percentage points increase versus last year. Some of the barriers they're looking at are materially different this year. I'd say maybe some of it was lack of knowledge or lack of certainty last year. The main barrier that they saw this year was just ability to integrate with legacy technology, which from our perspective isn't a major barrier. It's just something that needs to be accounted for. So the good news is the barriers are probably lower, perceived higher, but technically lower. Priority is higher, interest is higher. You're seeing more projects, more consortia, more investment scale up across every geography. Obviously that's not in the survey, but from what we can observe, every year that we've been working in blockchain, we've seen at least a doubling of interest from a qualitative and quantitative perspective. We're on an exponential curve. It's the very thin end of the beginning of that curve, but we're scaling.
And that's really interesting. What I like to see is to see these very higher end decision-making individuals have that interest there. So whether it leads to a blockchain project or it doesn't, they have the interest to explore it, to see how it can integrate, to see how it can make their systems, their processes, and maybe their end consumers' lives a lot better, to kind of see that being integrated.
100%. And I mean, the good news is what you can see now as a reference is pretty much every major industry has 1, 2, 3, 5 established consortium models, or leading lighthouse projects like a Walmart or a Carrefour, or a Maersk, doing big things using the technology and saying now there's an established reference. We haven't got to proliferation of blockchain at scale in production in every industry, but maybe some of that FOMO effect is there, or from an objective perspective, real projects that are funded for real and are scaling and have dedicated legal entities and dedicated development teams. that's not a fallacy, that's not a theory anymore, that's for real. And so you've got a great reference for executives to say, no, this isn't a fad, this is something that's being done for real.
Sure, and I think that's some incredible information. You know, for the businesses out there that are looking to start to integrate projects like this, where's the best place for them to reach out to Deloitte or to find you guys?
So we have 3 teams. Our 3 hub labs are based in New York, Hong Kong, and Dublin. We're pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find us at Deloitte.com. Pretty easy to find us. We're out there, and we'd welcome anyone to come and reach out to us. If we can help, that'd be fantastic.
That's awesome. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.